Hey everybody, welcome to Going In Raw today. It's a special episode because we have a guest in the house. Feast your eyes, it's Donovan Dijak. Thanks for being here, Dijak. How you doing?
I am doing excellent. How are you?
We're doing pretty good. We're happier
Yeah,
that
doing
you're
all right.
around, and we see that you've got already. It's been like 3 weeks, I think, since your departure from the WWE. You already got yourself a championship.
Has it been 3 weeks?
I know the
Yeah,
letter that you
roughly, yeah.
have on your because I did a whole crash course on Dijak this morning
Yeah.
because I'm a
Oh, yeah.
procrastinator. But it was June
Weird.
27th, I think, was the date on the letter.
Yep. So today's 3 weeks. Yep.
Yeah. So in
Time
that,
flies.
it really
It does.
does.
It really does.
Yeah.
In that amount of time, obviously, like I said, you've done a lot of interviews already, and so we're gonna try not to make you recover a lot of the ground. Like I know everybody asks you about Retribution, so at this point you're probably fucking over talking about Retribution. So we're gonna,
I mean, I was over Retribution the day it was pitched to me, but
I gather that from the interviews.
yeah.
So we're gonna try to cover some different ground, and I guess Larson and I, like 10 years ago, we got laid off from our job because we were an act back then, just working for a company, and so we had to then figure out how to navigate that ground. I had just brought home a kid from the hospital that my my wife gave birth to. Larson's got kids. We've been there before, and we know how exciting and incredibly scary it can be at the same time. How has it been for you over these 3 weeks figuring out the landscape now?
Yeah. It's been a bit of a whirlwind. Thankfully, my wife kind of stepped in a little bit for me. The Paragon Talent Group, which is Mojo Rawley and Steve Cave, have stepped in for me. Um, Not for me, but with me. There's kind of the four of us working together, especially in those first few days where my inbox just got absolutely flooded and we were trying to kind of figure everything out. And there wasn't a ton of time to do it right. We're only 3 weeks in, and I've already been on, I think, 5 shows now at this point, 5 or 6 shows. So yeah, we had to hit the ground running. We had, less than 48 hours in some cases to get things booked and solidified and figured out. So not a normal sort of procedure in terms of how these things normally go, but definitely peaks and valleys, lots of lots of confusion, lots of excitement, just a whole smorgasbord of feelings and trying to approach. Now we're kind of settling a bit more into a groove. The whole schedule is filling out a lot more seamlessly. So now we're kind of plugging and playing and adjusting and um, kind of using this time to both fill in gaps and to reach out and see what the field has to offer.
It seems like it offers a lot. I'm looking at your Twitter right now. You got Michael Oku coming up at Rev Pro, New England Pro Wrestling Academy appearance. Oh, a training thing.
Yep.
You've got like a ton, so it is really filling out. When there's sort of been like kind of like a template that was kind of laid by like Cody and maybe to a degree Drew McIntyre back in the day. But since then, in terms of like leaving, WWE specifically and making your big sort of announcement, hey, I'm now a free agent. This is the road I'm going to take. You chose sort of writing a letter and posting that on social media. There's been a number of other ways that guys have approached this. Malachi Black did like a whole straight up short film. Were there other options? Like, had you like, what was the thought process towards this is how I'm going to announce that I am now where I'm at?
Um, so I had a very short window of time to figure all of this out, right? That letter, the like we just mentioned, 3 weeks. We're 3 weeks removed from that letter. When I wrote that letter, I was much less than 3 weeks removed from finding out the truth of that letter. So I didn't have a lot of time to kind of come up with a with a game plan or design it. It kind of just like, you know, fell on me like a ton of bricks. And you got to think about the reality of that situation being that I did not expect that news in any capacity. I thought the exact opposite was going to happen. As we kept getting, and I've told this story a million times, but as we kept getting closer and closer to that date where I did ultimately find out that news, it started becoming more and more of a thought in my mind. But I thought, you're just being pessimistic, you're just being negative, you're imagining stuff, whatever. Ultimately it wasn't that hard to justify all the things that were happening to me. And then I got that phone call, which was from Mojo, because he was just the middleman, kind of relaying the information. It was like, oh, so I immediately had to. There were other things that needed to be addressed first, right? Like
Hmm.
I needed to figure out what we were going to do financially. I need to
Hmm.
figure out what we're going to do in terms of childcare. There's
Hmm.
just all sorts of real life things that come with finding out you're not employed in less than 2 weeks. So so that was first and foremost, right? Is dealing with those immediate sort of emergency level things that needed to be addressed. Um, then comes the creative part of it where it's like, okay, now I need to recalibrate. I need to figure out how to present this information. It's a unique situation. It's a situation that some people have been in a similar situation, but to me, it was so unique. I can't recall anyone else being in that level, especially considering that the practice of letting someone know that their contract is not going to be renewed when it's up is a relatively recent thing,
Yeah.
certainly in terms of the way that contracts have been handled over the past, we'll call it 20 years
Hmm.
under man. It feels like this is a relatively new thing. I mean, you could probably count on maybe two hands the amount of people who, at least publicly, have come out and said, "Oh, I was informed that WWE will not be renewing my contract." Only like three or four names come to my head.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Hmm.
And from what I could tell, again, I don't have exact statistics or time frames or anything like that, but from what I could tell, it seemed like most of those people got a little bit more notice.
Hmm.
I feel like mine was as maybe I'm wrong on this. I have no idea, but I feel like mine was closer to the deadline than most of them. So just based on that alone, it was a very very unique situation. Um, so yeah, I basically I was kind of flip-flopping back and forth on, do I use this really unique situation? Because if you remember correctly, I was booked on WWE, not television, but like on it was Speed. My
Yeah,
last
well,
match for
yeah, speed. I mean,
Hmm.
speed is
Hmm.
everybody knows speed. I mean, you mentioned in I
right.
think the Alfred interview, it's like
It
two
was
million people are watching that thing.
it was the pinned tweet
Hmm.
on WWE's Twitter account 2 days before that post because I just wrestled Xavier Woods. It gets 2.5 million views or
Yeah.
whatever. It's not like a small deal.
Hmm.
Triple H himself posted about it. So yeah, I'm coming right off of that, and I'm thinking, okay, so I have a unique opportunity here to just like a week after that's done, show up somewhere else unannounced as a surprise, and nobody even needs to know, right? I
Hmm.
don't
Yeah.
have to tell people that I'm a free agent. Uh, the reality of that situation is that uh, it's very difficult to change plans that quickly, especially for like a major company. So I get that.
Hmm.
I'm not. I kind of didn't expect it to work out, but I wanted to present the offer and give them time to run it around and see what came of it. So that was kind of the first thing that I did. And then we gave basically everybody a little bit of time to sit on that and see if they could figure something out. Turns out that you can't change booking plans that aggressively that quickly. In most instances, right? If again, I don't pretend I'm the biggest name in the world. I'm not. You mentioned Cody and Drew. Yes, there's parallels there, but I'm not even in the same conversation as those guys when they left WWE. I mean, take into consideration that I've never appeared on the main roster under my own real name. I was on the main roster as T-Bar for 2 years, and that's it.
Hmm.
So most of the world, if they're familiar with me or my face whatsoever, they're familiar with T-Bar. So like, there's going to be an adjustment period here because, like, yes, it's thank God that NXT is on the USA Network and it's a really well viewed program, but it's not Monday Night Raw and it's not
Hmm.
SmackDown in terms of viewership and in terms of just outreach and stuff like that. So I'm not blind to that, right? I'm aware that Cody Rhodes main evented pay-per-views in Hell in a Cell against D-Generation X before he went on the Indies. So at that point, he's a much bigger commodity than I am at this point in my career. Drew McIntyre, same thing. You know, Vince McMahon called him the chosen one in the ring. I never had anything even remotely close to that.
It's funny.
So
Is that the T-bar thing? Because okay, so we can only speak for ourselves as fans, and we were there for I think your second to last indie date before
Yeah,
you
it was the
went.
match
Because
against Trevor Lee and PWG.
yeah, the
Oh,
PWG.
LA.
We were at that thing, and I don't know if that was the first time you came onto our radar, and maybe that's a unique situation for us. But even when you were T-Bar, we just called you Dijak, because we were reviewing the show back then, and we were like, why do they have a mask on Dijak? That's silly. And then when you guys would do, and I know you've talked about this as well. I don't want to beat into the ground, but one thing that we were so impressed with, just to stray the tangent a little bit, when you were Retribution, was it was obvious when you were doing like social media posts where you were like giving your guys' own motivation for Retribution, which was never seen on television and was much better than what we were seeing on television. At that point we were like, oh man, this is cool. If they run with this, and that's what it always was with Retribution, was if they run with this. And then, but you obviously know the whole story, and you've told the story a million times. But we were like, we've always been more aware of you, and I think a lot of wrestling fans as Dijak, mainly because of the wrestling. Like I went back and I watched, and I was like, God damn! Like the matches that you were having. I went back and watched the Asylum match with Gacy, where he did that crazy moonsault, and that was just like the one sort of oh my god highlight, but it was an incredibly creative match. And I think that's one thing a dude your size, being as athletically gifted and creative in the ring, for us anyways, left such a bigger legacy than T-Bar or Retribution, which I kind of see as like an asterisk in your WWE run. But what's your perception of your run in WWE? Do you feel like you're more the T-Bar guy, or do you feel like, no, dude, I'm the wrestler. I'm the guy who killed it? Because, dude, there was like a string of NXT matches that you had and in wrestling, sometimes it is, what have you done for us lately? So, like, I think the perception of Dijak that we have is dude who kills it in the ring.
yeah, the my I'm so thankful for my last NXT run. Well, I mean, I'm thankful for my whole time with WWE, just from like a personal standpoint and a family standpoint. My family has a lot thanks to WWE and all of that. So there's no animosity whatsoever. In terms of me creatively and who I identify with, the last run under Shawn Michaels White and Gold NXT is 100%. Ironically, even though it began with an idea from Vince McMahon, of all people, it turned into my own sort of creation and my own rendition of how I viewed that thought. And the more we fleshed it out, the more I presented to the creative team at NXT, and the more that we all loved it, we were all on the same page. So in terms of the presentation and the not even the production, because the production was a lot of them, um, with the exception of the backstage vignettes, which was a lot of my vision. Um, but yeah, they took care of the entrance and the music and all that stuff, and I thought it was perfect. But I took care of like the look, or I presented the look, and they greenlit all of it, the backstory, all that stuff. So yeah, it was really a collaboration of a character, and the more we went, because I was there for a year and a half, the more we progressed with it, the more it started to lean and trend closer to me and how I act in my everyday life, as opposed to, how I act when I'm angry or when I'm at work or whatever thing I was leaning into at the beginning of that. So yeah, I still identify really strongly with that presentation. I still like it. I still use it. I want to continue to mold and evolve it over time. Um, but yeah, before that, it felt more like most of the stuff I was doing like that felt more like roles that were being presented to me, which I'm all for. I'm a huge acting fan. I take acting classes right now with the best acting teacher in the world, Howard Fine. So I want to be an actor, especially when I'm done with pro wrestling. So I'm all for somebody giving me things and giving me something to portray and me finding a way to find that within myself. I'm all for that. And I was happy to do that. But the Dijak character really feels like I was both the writer, the director, and not the director, but I was the writer and the actor as well. So it felt like it was more of my own creation, and that really resonates with me, and it feels like something that I can continue to bring and mold and shift and change. So yeah, that's 100% more and more felt like it was something that I could own.
Yeah. You mentioned, I think it was Stick to Wrestling interview with them, Seven and Sin City being kind of major influences on the Hard Justice character in NXT. Were there any other cinematic, specifically? Steve and I went to film school. We're huge movie fans. Cinematic influences. There seems to be a lot of like '80s action movie vibes going there.
Yeah,
Seagal
for
stuff,
sure.
maybe Cobra. Um,
Cobra a little bit. I've never actually seen Cobra, but I did like the cover art of it.
yeah.
I, I think I saw that when I was a
Gladiators.
kid
Yeah.
in the theaters when I was like 7. But the thing I don't remember dick about it except for the cover, except for the
Yeah.
the poster because the poster is amazing.
I don't think it's the
Yeah.
strongest movie in the world. Terminator for sure. Um, Especially Terminator 1,
Hmm.
less so than Judgment Day or 3 or 4, 5, or there was a million after. But
Yeah.
yeah, 1 specifically. Um, Terminator and Punisher is another one. Just I really wanted that like rogue law enforcement vigilante,
Hmm.
like just obsessed with justice and who knows what justice is, right? That was kind of the idea behind it, because there were going to be times where I was doing things that were completely unjust, but
Hmm.
it's I needed to convince myself in my own mind that this was my brand of justice. This is my form. If even if this guy's a good guy and he's never done anything wrong, he's still he doesn't even realize the wrongs that he's done to me. So I'm going to make him pay for those. That was kind of how I motivated the character and stuff like that. And it's still what I do and what I use to this day. And I think it resonates with people, especially the more that I bring my own true feelings into how the presentation comes out. I think people start to really sink their teeth into that.
You mentioned the backstage vignettes being something that you particularly had a heavy hand in. What was that process like when you're when you're doing one of those vignettes? It's more like a proper short film. You got a camera crew. What's your role besides actor in all that? Are you directing? Like, are you saying, hey, the shot should be over here? We should get this shot right here. How does that process work?
It's a great question. So the first time I came up with this concept was uh so I was told, and I've told the story a bunch, so I'll just give the real abridged cliff notes. I was given a call and I was told that you're going to be going down to NXT for a little bit. And I said, great. And then 10 minutes later, I got a phone call from Shawn Michaels, and he wanted to meet that night. He didn't realize I didn't live in Orlando, but I was like, yeah, I need to fly in. And he was like, oh, we can fly people in. So I ended up, we scheduled a thing, and I had a meeting with them maybe 10 days or 2 weeks later, something like that. So in that window of time, in that 10 or 14 days of time, I said, okay, they have this NXT 2.0 thing going on. It seems to be transitioning more into it seems like they want a mix of both, right? They want to stick with the characters and the young talent and the athletes from 2.0, but they want to trend a little bit more back to the black and gold in ring strong. So I'm like, I can do both of that. This is exactly what I need, because for a long time I've been saying, if I want to stand out on the WWE roster, not just the NXT roster, but on the WWE roster, right? Because if I get called back up, I'm going to be because that's what I was told. I was told 6 months in NXT and then you'll be back up to the main roster. So I said, great, okay. So I got 6 months to put myself in the same conversation as Brock Lesnar, Bobby Lashley, Randy Orton, just these guys who have this immense, immense presence, both physically and like in real life, like they've been in like UFC cages so I'm like, I can't compete with that, right? Like I'm a big guy and I'm in good shape, but I'm not Brock Lesnar, Bobby Lashley, and my background is not, hey, I'm a former UFC or Bellator champion, right? So I don't have a legitimate, I have a legitimate like football and basketball background, but it's nothing like best in the world at
Hmm.
either of those things. So I'm thinking to myself, if I want to go toe to toe with those guys in terms of presentation, then I need to have some sort of character. I can't just be, hey, here I am, Dominic Dijakovic. I'm also a wrestler. I also want to win championships because then they'll just, the fans will just eat me for lunch and be like, get this guy out of here. Um, so I said I need to revamp this character. I need to come up with something. So I went down to my basement. I got this table. I bought an old school tape recorder because that was kind of my vision for this like old school like film noir style, like 80s vigilante police officer guy. I'm like interrogating people, but it's kind of just an excuse to torture them, sort of thing. And then
Yeah.
I had some lighting mechanisms down there. I had a smoke machine behind me, and I liked the glasses and the look and the new beard and all that stuff. So I put all of it together, and I started doing this tight filming with real close angles and like black and white filter on it because I wanted it to feel like old but like mysterious and all those sort of things. I kind of changed my voice and my delivery a little bit. And I came up with the and I filmed all of this. And in that meeting with Sean and Johnny and Matt, I I sat down and I had an iPad and I said, and it was with a binder, and the binder had the pictures of all the stuff and the background story and all that. I said, here's the video and here's what I think. And they watched the video and they're like, that's fucking great. We love it. Um, like 3 weeks later, I I had my first vignette. Maybe 2 weeks later, I have my first vignette, and it's in front of that steel grate door that they have over at the training center. They put a table down. They said, bring your tape recorder, bring all this stuff. They had their own smoke machine, they had their own lighting, and it's almost all of JB, Jeremy Borash, and Jimmy Paradise, just the two guys who shot everything cool. And they shot the Boneyard match. They shot
Hmm.
Matt Hardy's deletion thing at his compound in TNA. They
Mm.
shot, everything cool that you ever saw during the pandemic or any of that stuff. They shot that stuff. So they're geniuses of production. They probably watched my video and said, okay, we can make this even better. And then they did exactly that. So the second I sat down, they were like, hey, we want to shoot it here and here with these cameras. What do you think? And I was like, that's way better than anything I could ever do. So from that point on, and especially for that first 6 months, I was getting the lines from like writers and stuff. And I said, you know what? These guys are doing me such a favor. I'm not going to push back on this writing whatsoever. I'm just going to read. I'm going to memorize these lines. I'm going to read them. I'm going to be I'm going to play the role of actor, right? Because an actor gets a line, he gets his lines, and he doesn't go, especially like a rookie actor or whatever. Like maybe Robert De Niro can push back on his lines or whatever, but I cannot. So I got my lines, and I'm like, you know what? I don't care that I've been in NXT for 3 years and main roster for 2 years. I'm not pushing back on any of this. I'm going to memorize it. I'm going to motivate it, and I'm going to deliver these as best as I possibly can as this character. So I did that for like 6, 7, 8 months, and then little by little, I started trying to integrate more and more of my verbiage into it. Try to steer a little bit closer to how I would talk as opposed to how the vigilante character would talk. And we started to trend more and more in that direction to the point where at the conclusion of it, I was very happy with the presentation and all the delivery and all that different stuff and the amount of leeway that I was getting both on the microphone and in the backstage vignettes and all. And it felt like we really had a good system going, moving into whatever happened to come next after Stand and Deliver, which was kind of up in the air. I thought maybe it was going to be Trick Williams. It ended up being the draft, and then now I'm back to doing all of it on my own.
What at what point? It's interesting. The character stuff is pretty interesting in terms of evolving the character to sort of fuse yourself a bit more into it. At what point? Because like when you look at again, some of the matches in NXT were just absolutely killer. I watched the Last Man Standing with Ilya. At what point did you like? At what feud would you say, or what story would you say, were you sort of happiest with? Oh, I killed it. This is really how I want this character to go, and this is a really solid place. At what like could you like sort of give us one of the feuds that you were like, this is really good?
Honestly, and this will come as a maybe a surprise to some people, but if you've followed me closely, certainly on like podcasts and interviews, it's less of a surprise. Um, my real sort of breakthrough moments came very, very, very close to the end, like not that long ago.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because there's the debut, right? And I debut as this character, and it's like drop the T-bar mask and the fire, and here I come, and I come out, and I have my first entrance and all that stuff, and all that goes. Or the very first thing I did was appear behind Wes, and I have the new presentation and all that. But so I was very happy with that. And then I came out and I did my entrance, and we rehearsed my entrance, and I did the first one, the first match, and I got the promo in the ring. I was very happy with all that too, besides the fact that I was sweating a lot and self-tanning was going in my eyes and burning. I was blinking uncontrollably that whole promo, so I was like, oh. But independent of that, I thought all of it went well. I delivered the lines exactly as they were written for me. So I was happy. I was happy with all of it. All that presentation all felt good and strong and exactly what I was looking for. But a lot of that was sort of, for lack of a better term, given to me,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it didn't feel it felt like it was a collaboration, but it was like at the end of the day, I don't make the music. I don't set the lights for the entrance. I didn't green light the recording stuff back to it felt like it was just stuff that was given to me in terms of a push, and I was thrilled with all that because I didn't get that level of it at any point in my WWE career. So I was thrilled that it felt like they were investing in me and giving me this production and this push. So I was super happy at that point. After that, I said, okay, my job is to follow through on everything that's said and then knock it out of the park every match. And I had very little concerns about that,
Mm-hmm.
right? I said, if you give me time, you give me good opponents, and you give me premium live events to do it on, yeah, the matches will be great. I have the utmost confidence in myself in the ring, especially that I know I'm going to handle that part. And Vengeance Day came and went, and I said, okay, and then there was just match after match after match, and I was consistently doing, like I said in my letter, I was consistently over. I don't remember the exact phrase I used, but I was outperforming everybody's expectations, I think is
Hmm.
the phrase I
Mm-hmm.
used. That was consistent. And I was told as such by John Michaels himself, by everybody who by Triple H himself. He told me that. So that is, I know that's working, right? But that's always been there. I've always had really good matches as a wrestler. What I needed was to get this character over and to get the fans behind me, and that seemed like a bit more of a process, right? Because it's this sort of dark character. I'm mostly a bad guy, so you're kind of getting booed. When you get booed, you get a lot of like T-bar, sort of chants. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, all right, are they making fun of me? Are they into it? Am I getting real heat? Does it go away heat? There's all of those sort of middle grounds. So it really wasn't until the build to Stand and Deliver where it was communicated to me from creative, like, hey, we want you to lean like way more into what you're doing online. They're like, because that's resonating with people way more so than just like angry justice,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
uh, arrest people, whatever I was trying to do before. And in my mind, I was like, yeah, for sure. Like that's what I want to do. I was just reading the lines,
Yeah.
but yeah. So I started to craft more in that direction. There was a very noticeable difference. I remember even walking around Philadelphia WrestleMania weekend, just in the streets, and it wasn't like this is what I got for most of my career, and I still get it. You'd walk around and be like, "Hey, Dijak, you have some of my favorite matches. I loved your feud with Keith Lee." That's what people would always say.
Mm-hmm.
I said that constantly, and rightfully so. Keith's one of the best wrestlers in the world and a good friend of mine. But that's what it always was. Like my last name might as well have been "I love your matches with Keith Lee" because that's all I ever heard. Um, Now I'm walking around Philadelphia, and it's like, "Hey, Dijak, ratio," and I'm thinking to myself, "Oh, th this." personality, because ratio is just, it's a silly meme or whatever that I'm just shit posting about. But at the end of the day, it's a reflection of my personality, right? Because it's like, I don't really care about this stuff. None of this stuff matters, ratio, whatever. It's all just, that's kind of how I feel on a day-to-day basis. So I'm like, I think people are starting to gravitate towards this stuff. And then we had the match at Stand and Deliver. It was a great match. Those two other guys are absolutely tremendous. Match super well received. And in the match, you can feel the people starting to generate towards me. Whereas the matches before that, because I've had 1,000 North American Championship matches on pay-per-view before. Well, not 1,000, but I guess two before that. But I've had high stakes matches on premium live events before, and almost always the crowd plays into like, you're the bad guy, so we're gonna boo you, and we're gonna, even in my hometown against Ilya Dragunov. I thought maybe because I'd wrestled in Lowell so much, my one of my first matches in my career was in Lowell. So I thought for sure that I might get cheered more than him, but it kind of was a little bit even, maybe so a little bit more so in his favor, just because we lean so heavily into the babyface heel dynamic. And it's like, this is the bad guy, this is the good guy. And that's just always the role that I've played. Going into Stand and Deliver, we didn't lean so much into that because we were leaning more into who I was as a person. And you could feel towards the end of that match that no, those people, like, it's a Philadelphia crowd, so it's a hardcore crowd, but not like my crowd per se, just like a hardcore fan base. You could say pretty clearly at the end of that match. At the beginning, it was 50-50 and Oba made his entrance and he's super over and he's got a great presentation. But by the end of that match, those people want to see me win the match. A lot of the people, not all of them, but a lot of we ran some false finishes at the end where they were not happy when the three did not happen. And you can go, if you question my judgment on that, you can go watch the footage.
Yeah, didn't like Josh Briggs, I think, pulled you off a pin or pulled the ref out of the match.
Pulled the ref. Yeah, that was the big one.
And the crowd, the crowd yelled at Briggs for that.
Yeah, they were not happy.
Yeah.
That was by my design, as was the finish. The finish itself was I was given the thought of it, and then I think I came up with the hand into the frame, which a lot of people didn't like that because they were like, "You're still pinning him," which I disagree with. I think if a guy's choking you around the throat, that breaks up the pin. But it's pretend, so you can do whatever.
Right?
Want.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that match, and then I think the fact that the people got with me with the chant that I hadn't done in a long time, and then we started the feud with Metaphor, which at the time I didn't know where I was going or what I was doing, but that match, and I told everyone in the back this, that match, which ended up being my last TV match for WWE ever. When I got to the back, that's the best I've ever felt about any match. Not because it was like a great match or a 5-star. It was really good. Noam's an excellent worker, but again, it's like I don't know, like an 8-minute TV match or whatever. So you're not looking for 5 stars, home run, match of the year candidate. You're just looking for a really good, solid performance, which it was. But more than that, that was the first time where I ever felt like, oh no, this crowd, like, they want me. Like they are, and again, it's an isolated crowd, but like I'd been around them for a long enough time, and I could remember the Stand and Deliver crowd, which is the biggest NXT crowd of all time. And I'm like, these people are rallying for me. Like and that's the first time in my career where I felt like no, they don't care what the booking is, they're choosing me. And I was like, wow, what a great feeling. Like I'm looking around, there's Dijak signs everywhere, there's starting chants, and I didn't have like a baby face turn. I didn't do anything to become a baby face. You could just feel that they were like, no, it's time. It's time. Like, you've been here, you've been doing this. We know what you've been doing. You come here every week and you do the same thing. Like, it's time. So I got to the back and I'm like, man, I feel good about this. Like, this is great. We're trending in such a great direction. And WWE disagreed, I guess.
Yeah. Dude, it's funny because we've seen this having watched forever now. Like, there are certain wrestlers who, no matter what the presentation is, if they're just busting their ass in that ring, and if they're giving us those matches, like, there is that connection. And on top of that, there's also, like, even through your character, and yeah, this might have been an evolution thing, but even through the character, you start to build that connection as like a genuine person. You know, it's like
I really genuinely believe it was a character presentation and a talking presentation
mm,
way more than the matches. Because listen, nobody loves the matches more than me. I was at training last night at the New England Pro Wrestling Academy. I teach footwork, I teach fundamentals, I teach psychology. No, I'm obsessed with the in-ring portion of professional wrestling, like to a sickening degree. It's all I think about. I wish more than anything else in this world that it was the most important part of professional wrestling. The reality is I have so much experience to know that it just is not. It's not.
yeah.
I know some of the best wrestlers on the face of the earth who can deliver every single time, and it's just not enough. You have to have other pieces of it. Because I was that guy for a very long time. People remember Dominic Dijakovic different than reality. They got this like old thing good black and gold sort of memory of Dominic Dijakovic. I lived Dominic Dijakovic. He was not that over.
Yeah.
The reality is I was doing the performances. I was having the great matches with Keith Lee. They were world renowned. I was in the ring with Keith. Keith was over. I was not. That's reality. Like people knew that I was going to have a good match, and they were like, "Hey, cool, here comes a good match." But they were not like, "Ooh, let me go get the Dominic Dijakovic shirt." Oh, let me, let me rally behind him. Let me make a an account that supports him. Let me start a hashtag. None of that was happening. I lived the I was there living it in real time. I know who my dedicated supporters are, and there weren't a lot of them.
Were there pitches back during that time? Because remember when you showed up and we're like, oh, cool, Dijak's here. Why does he have so many more letters in his name now? Whatever, Dijak is here. Yeah. Were there pitches back then for a character for you? As opposed, because obviously, you were closely linked to Keith Lee because you guys had some crazy awesome matches back then. But given that you were just sort of dude and understanding the importance of character, did you make pitches back then to Triple H, who was running it back then?
No, because it was just a different time, right? It was at a time where it was black and gold. It was trending really heavily in that direction. I came in with the Undisputed Era and Leo Rush, and before us was, you know, Tommy End and Big Damo, and just this litany, just a wave, an avalanche of all the biggest names on the independent scene. Um, and nobody had like a gimmick, right? We were all just kind of shades of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And people were having great success with that. But a lot of it just kind of depended on how you were being booked because we were all capable of having the great matches. We were all capable of cutting the good promos. It just, there's only so many belts and there's only so much TV time and there's only so many spots at the top of the card and spots at the top middle of the card and and there was just so much talent there at the time that I wasn't on TV for a while. And then when I was on TV, I was in the middle, and then it started to trend upward, but I got injured. And then it was like, okay, so we're gonna use you as kind of an accessory in the main event area because I was in the main event of War Games. And it was like, cool, so maybe we'll take off a little bit here. And then I started a feud with Keith, but Keith became, way hotter of a commodity than me. And again, Keith is just himself, but himself is at that point more entertaining and more of a gravitational pull than just myself. Uh, so they went with Keith a little bit, and we were feuding, and they kept going with Keith, and then COVID hit, and it was like, well, that's the end of all that. Now we're all just struggling to keep our head above water,
Yeah.
gasping for air. And then of course the retribution stuff happened, and honestly, when I first learned about the retribution stuff, I was like, oh, this will be, great opportunity for character. Because what's more of a character than a guy with a shaved head and a mask and face paint and this weird name and all this stuff? And yeah. So I always viewed everything as like a great opportunity. I'm going to do my best with it. Obviously, there's varying levels of that. Ultimately, most of the time, not all of the time, and maybe not even most of the time, but more often than not, the presentation on television will dictate a lot of this. A lot, right? Because there's been guys who've gotten a huge push and not got over, right? That happens for sure. There's also been guys who weren't featured a lot on television and got themselves over, right? That happens sometimes too. More often than not, the more you're presented on TV and the more you're presented as a winner and a champion and all that stuff, the more people are going to be like, "Hey, this guy's fucking great. Let's rally behind it." It's
Yeah.
just that's human nature, right? And we all get that.
Yeah.
And I've been in the business long enough to understand that not everybody can get that. So I'm not. There's no sour grapes or anything like that. It's just it's a timing thing and it's a feel, and there's all sorts of different factors that get woven into it. But yeah, for sure, just to circle back to 2 questions ago, that match with Noam Dar, because people could go back and watch it, and it was just like loud, loud chants. I could really feel the crowd behind me. I ended up losing because ultimately it was to build another contender for Trick, because I think we knew at that point, or I think they knew at that point that I was probably getting drafted, which is fine, right? If you're on your way out, there's no point in winning. You might as well
Hmm.
build the guy. But I could feel the air get sucked out of the fans when I lost because they were like, oh, which is cool. That's fine. That's part of the field because we're building a heel to compete with the top guy babyface. So it's great. Let's take the air out of him. But yeah, that was definitely for sure the time where I felt like the most like, oh, these people are completely connected to me and this character and this presentation of myself, and I can't wait to really start to give it to them.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Excuse me. As far as developing character
Mhm.
and tying that with presentation, as you mentioned, it when you came up with the hard justice character, for example, did that influence or educate how you approach matches in the ring? Did it
Absolutely.
change up your style? Did it change up your approach to stringing moves together?
100%. Yeah. I designed a few more for starters, I wanted to be more grounded, uh just as a reset, right? Because I came into NXT like totally gung ho, like I'm gonna high fly everything, I'm gonna dive over the top rope every match, I'm gonna jump, I'm gonna do every moonsault in the book, I'm gonna do all of it because that's my shtick, right? Is I'm the best high flying big man of all time. Um, that precedent got established over the course of 2 or 3 years. And then T-bar came around, there was none. I never did one dive, I never did one flip, I never did one anything as T-bar because I just felt like it didn't fit at all.
Hmm.
Plus, I gained 30 pounds because I was trying to be as different as I possibly could because I knew that there was going to be a disconnect when people saw like, wait, that's Dijak in the
Hmm.
thing, and I was like, I just want them to think I'm a completely different person. It obviously didn't work, and they figured out who I was. But just visually, I wanted the presentation to be as different as possible
Mm-hmm.
because I knew that I obviously didn't want to be T-bar forever. My aspirations were bigger than T-bar, so I wanted the to be able to change dramatically back to something else or to something different or keep progressing or whatever. Just visually, I wanted lots of growth over time, which I built into this because I started cutting my hair differently. I started dyeing my hair different shades. The gear I wanted pants instead of trunks. I wanted to be a little trimmer than I usually am. So yeah, I kind of pieced as much of it into being different presentation wise, and I wanted that to translate in ring too. So I wanted to trend a little bit away from the fully grounded effect of T-bar, but I wanted it to be more like I wanted to use more submissions, right? Because I wanted there to be like stuff where I'm like quote unquote apprehending people on the ground.
Hmm.
So I have like hammerlock stuff on the ground where I'm bludgeoning a guy from behind with like my fists. So that was a new sort of thing. I wanted to have more where I'm in complete control of a guy who doesn't have as much uh control of his surroundings and things like that. I just wanted to give the presentation of like uh lots of like apprehension sort of presentation, if that makes sense. Just to
Mm-hmm.
just to plant the seeds of like this guy's maybe former law enforcement, but he's gone rogue, so he's using some of those tactics to be unjust or whatever,
Hmm.
whatever thing I was trying to present. And then, for the bigger matches, like I think for the most part, almost every dive I did or everything off the top rope was towards the end of like a 20-minute match on a premium live event or something. Because I didn't want to abandon that totally. I wanted to be like Undertaker style where he dives over the top rope, but it's only like once a year, and
Hmm.
you're gonna see it at WrestleMania and that's it. Well, I didn't have a WrestleMania to do it at. I had premium live events that I hadn't been on many of. So I was like, I'm gonna do that stuff here. And I feel like that started to translate little more. And I'm still using that style because again, it's going to extend my longevity. It's going to make those things matter a whole heck of a lot more when I actually do them. So yeah, I definitely adjusted my in-ring style. But in terms of like uh, sequencing and timing and move set, um, and even a lot of the names of the moves, most of that is stayed consistent. And again, let's not forget that I was there for 7 years, so it wasn't
Mhm.
like I was just like resting on my laurels for 7 years. I go back and I watch those PWG matches that you guys were at, for example, and yeah, I'm a completely different wrestler, right? Even in terms of because I've always been very capable in ring, but there's a lot of stuff in between that I've been working on really hard for 7 years. So you can watch, and if I even watch a match from 2 years ago, I can pick out like, oh, that sucked, that sucked, that
Mhm.
sucked, that sucked, because I'm always training, I'm always evolving. The whole time I was in NXT, I was religiously going to Fit Finley's class and training with one of the best trainers of all time. So it wasn't like I was just sitting around twiddling my thumbs going, I'm so great. I can't wait for somebody to give me a chance. I've always been working super hard at this in every aspect, from promos to in-ring to advancing moves to tweaking psychology to fixing footwork and things like that. And right now I'm 37, I'm physically probably around the the prime of where I'm ever going to be, right? It's for sure only going to be downhill from like 40 on, right? So I'm hoping I'm able to maintain sort of this level that I'm at until maybe like 43 or 44, to the point where I can really get the character over and start to tone down, how many huge bumps I'm taking and how many
Hmm.
times I'm diving over the top rope and stuff like that.
Definitely.
In the
Um,
short amount of, oh, sorry, go ahead, Larson.
oh, I was just going to ask. Now that you're diving headfirst back into the independent scene, a scene you haven't really been in about 7 years.
Mhm.
What's changed? What's the same? Obviously there's a whole new promotion, AEW, that sprung up in the time in between.
Mhm.
So how has the independent scene evolved since you were last in it?
Yeah, pun intended. So there's a so just as a ground level, it's tremendously different for me personally, just because of where I was in that platform. And now, obviously, there's going to be a much greater demand just because that's how it matches up. So, just for me, that in its own right is a completely brand new experience for me, right? Because even when I was leaving, I started to make a pretty good name for myself as like a quote unquote indie darling. I was on a lot of the bigger ones like PWG, obviously at the end, AAW Beyond, Rev Pro, Progress. I was on all these promotions back when those were like the big, five or whatever. Um, but back then it was like reach out to the promoter, reach out to somebody I know, hey, my name is Donovan Dijak. I'm featured on Ring of Honor. I'd love to come in for you. So it's like, please book me, please book me, please book me. And then finally one day they're like, yes, WXW in Germany is another big one. There's a bunch of big ones. I'm sure I'm missing a bunch of them. I was on Evolve, I was on Ring of Honor, like I mentioned. So, there's a bunch of stuff that I was doing, but it was all like me, I reached out to every single promotion I just listed and said, like, please, but probably multiple times before any of them. Not probably, now that I'm Rolodexing through my head, all of them. Every single promotion I listed to, I reached out to at least 3 times before they booked me for the
Oh,
first.
wow.
So it was the grind and the hustle.
Hmm.
Now it's the opposite, right? Now my inbox is getting flooded, and I'm trying to figure out where fits where and what and who's going to hit this price, and all those different aspects of the business part of it. So that's a completely different approach. But to answer the first part of your question, what's different about the scene? It is wide open, like wide open. Whereas I used to go from all of those promotions, plus the smaller ones, plus the local ones, and I'm seeing the same guys, just the same, like there's Ethan Page, there's Mike Bailey, there's you just the list of guys who all ended up in some company, right? Between TNA, NXT, the main roster, and AEW, and then even Ring of Honor, like all of these guys are signed, right? So I go from indie to indie now, and it's like there's just brand new people. Like the roster's almost all brand new people, and then like a sprinkling of the let's call them like the GCW regulars,
Hmm.
Hmm.
because it's like GCW has their like roster of like traveling talent, and then in between GCW shows they're doing like indies. So those people are booked a ton, a ton. Every show I've been on has had the GCW regulars, and then it's just like local guys. That's it.
Yeah.
Even the bigger ones, it's just GCW a little bit if they're there, and if they're not there, almost all local guys. Whereas that was not the indie scene when I was familiar with it. So yeah, it's just wide open. Like everybody signed, which is great, by the way. That's
Hmm.
Hmm.
awesome
Yeah.
for the economy of being a talent, right? Because that just means that everybody's making a ton of money. Even the people who are on the indies are probably making a ton of money just because there's not a lot to choose from in terms of what you're getting. And if you're a local guy, that's even better, right? Because now you can end up on these Beyond promotions. Whereas I had to fight and scratch and claw to get on Beyond, even though I lived 30 minutes down the road for uh 2.5 years, right?
Hmm.
So now you can you have 5 months of training and it's like boom, you're on these shows. Like there's just so many more opportunities. Um, that's great. It's great for everybody. It's really good for as much as I want to go to these shows and I want to be like surrounded by all the people that I know, the reality is most of the people that I'm friends with and I'm familiar with are signed to some company in some capacity. So in that sense, it was awesome to go to Forbidden Door and be backstage there because I got to see everybody and I knew everybody back there. So it's just it's really cool. Plus now I'm at a point where every show I go to, I get to meet a bunch of brand new people. I get to wrestle people who don't have as much experience as me, which is awesome. I love doing that. I was able to do that for my most of my time in NXT. So yeah, it's all just incredibly exciting.
Speaking of the indies, like I said, you've got a lot of dates coming up. What is next that you'd like to tell the people to go to, and we'll have them go there. What you got coming up on the immediate horizon?
Next up tomorrow, I got Chaotic Wrestling, which is my home promotion. It's the first promotion that I trained in, that I booked in, or that I was booked in. Um, Not the first promotion I was booked in, but like the first promotion that like basically paid me to to actually
Yeah,
wrestle.
right. Yeah.
It's my first championship. Was it Chaotic Wrestling? Yeah, I have basically two homes in because I'm from Massachusetts. Chaotic Wrestling is the first promotion that used me, and Beyond Wrestling is the first promotion that had like international, not international, but like national sort of appeal that used me. Chaotic is a little more of a New England promotion, whereas Beyond uses the internet to increase their
Hmm.
outreach more. So but I made my name in both of those. So they're very much both my home. So yeah, I returned to Chaotic for the first time in 7 years, I guess. My last match at Chaotic Wrestling was a triple threat match between myself, Josh Briggs, and Christian Casanova,
Oh wow.
Wow.
who is Carmelo Hayes now.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's that kind of stuff that we built up at Chaotic. So I'm thrilled to go back. Uh, Main event there is myself versus JT Dunn, who's a guy that I'm familiar with, and I wrestled him 100 times. This one's for a championship that I've held before, the Chaotic Wrestling Heavyweight Championship. So I'm super excited about that. After that, I got a super busy weekend. Next week, I got Rise, which I'm the Rise Grand Champion of Rise Pro Wrestling. So I'm going there to defend my championship on Friday. On Saturday, back to Beyond Wrestling, which I mentioned. That's gonna be great. And then Sunday, I gotta book it out of there to. Oh, I'm sorry. Saturday is not Beyond Wrestling. Saturday is Northeast Wrestling. It's my return to Northeast, where I wrestled a million times there. I wrestled Cody Rhodes for the NEW Championship at Northeast Wrestling, so I'm excited to go back there myself versus Casey Navarro, who people might know from TNA. And then I got to book it to a flight over to Rev Pro for that match that you already mentioned with Michael O'Cruz. So super excited about all that. That's a huge weekend for me. I got a ton of stuff coming up, but that's the immediate stuff that's coming up, and I can't wait for all of it.
It sounds exhausting, But it sounds really exciting though. I mean,
does.
especially watching, I watched two of the interviews today, the one with Sean and the one with Alfred. And so much of your time, even though there were so many great matches and so many great moments, there sounded like there was a lot of frustration during your time there, just trying to be used. And now you're like you said, you're kind of the belle of the ball right now. And so like your inbox is filling up. You get to be back on the grind. I know at 30, once you get to 35, it's like, man, I'm tired a lot more than I used to be.
Well, see, the being tired part of it doesn't matter to me because like I'm used to that. I was an old soul when I was 25, so I was tired back then. It's whatever. Now the grind of it is being away from my kids because the last time I was on the Indies, I didn't have any kids.
Yeah.
So it was, my wife can deal with it. She's dealt with me being on the road my whole career. My kids, it's a little tougher because even though I was in WWE, I was home quite a bit, right?
Yeah.
I didn't do a lot of house show loops, so it would just be TV home, and the home portion of it is longer than the TV portion of it. I was home for usually 5 days, and then gone for 2. So that part of it is not fun, right?
Yeah.
That's the work part of it. Is
Yeah.
just being with my kids. But I'll say this: I'm so thankful to the promoters. They've been working tremendously with me. I'm at a point in my career now where I can ask for a little bit more in terms of accommodation, and these guys have been outstanding at accommodating me. Like I'm able to fly to England and fly home the next day so I can spend 3 days with my kids, whereas 7 years ago that was not an option. If you were going to fly me to England, I needed to stay there for 3 weeks and do a tour and do this and do this, bill all this stuff to try to justify the price. Now everybody's meeting me halfway and they understand that I'm a huge family man. My family comes number 1, 2, 3, and 4 before everything else, and then there's a huge gap between 5 and 6, which is wrestling. So promoters understand that they're 100% bending over backwards to make this stuff work for me, and I could not be more appreciative because my family means everything to me, and they're giving me as much time as I possibly can with them. So I'm super thankful for that.
Well, as well they should. You're fucking Dijak, man. Go out there and kill it. And thanks for hanging out with us, man. We really appreciate you taking the time, and good luck to you. We'll see you down the road.
Yeah, best
Thank
of
you
luck,
very
man.
much. I appreciate it.